Thanks for coming. And that will be my last orgasm reference in this year's AMEC Summit. I'm here leading the, for those of you who've come before, you know I have a history of them. I'm here talking to you about this topic today with my panel because 8 years ago I failed. I failed to get something right that I now know much better about, and I'm here to share that experience together with the panel today. Hence the title of our presentation, a little unusual, the In and Out poem. Also not a sexual reference, by the way, in and out. But it refers to the internal communications. The piece that we often overlook when we're pulling together great integrated measurement models is internal comms. And the data we have to tie into an integrated measurement model, connecting internal comms and measures like employee engagement or alignment to business goals against business results, share price even, business performance measures. So we're going to look today at how to overcome siloed measurement and insights and finally integrate this important measure into the mix. So these are our key topics. No doubt you read these because they're on the outline, so I'll skip over those. You know why you're in the room. So the why inside and out? Well, as I said, employee comms is the missing piece and has been for a long time. Well, when we're talking about external comms, we're talking about this lovely paradise island on the top. The picture we can paint of what our company or brand is doing. And we can control that and how wonderful it looks to the outside world. But of course, the reality is the culture beneath it. As we see repeatedly, and we talked yesterday about millennials looking for the culture they want to join, the brand purpose of an organization and what they want to align to. And that's all the stuff underneath. So what we're trying to do in this session, and this idea is to propose a more integrated model, including getting down below the surface of the happy, rosy picture that we can control to what's really going on in our organization and bringing that into the integrated measurement model. By the way, that also involves some really interesting new partners in the room. So I was saying to Barry when we first conceived the idea of this discussion, is it's conceivable that in a couple of years we could have talent professionals, or HR professionals, heads of people management in organizations, who control all that data around employee satisfaction and engagement and are equally a partner in measurement strategies. So consider that, but when you go back to your organizations and talk about integrated measurement, are you talking to the people in talent and HR who control this data and could bring into your real, true integrated measurement model? We have a brilliant panel assembled today, and each of them have in some way worked on very advanced integrated models of measurement and to some extent started to touch on integrating employee data, internal communications data into those models. So each of them will speak about their case study and experience sharing and some very specific models and show you what they look like. This is workshop session, so it's intended to be more practical. What does it look like? What are the pitfalls? What have we learnt along the journey? So we'll hear from Ann-Sofie from byBrick Insight, from Jose Carlos Martinez from Iberdrola, and from Jerry Nichols from SAP. So please thank them for joining today as well. Can I ask you to thank them much louder, because in the AMEC tradition, when there are two workshops going on simultaneously, one room claps much louder than the other, so that everyone in the other room thinks they've gone to the more boring workshop. And that's Jim McNamara, who's pretty tough competition. So let's welcome our speakers. Thank you, AMEC. That should do the trick. All right, we're going to get right into it. So I mentioned I failed 8 years ago. I worked on probably the most important brand relaunch of the Shangri-La Hotel Group. And I was very proud, thinking I was shit hot, that we'd done this great employee engagement campaign to begin with before we launched the external branding campaign. And we had measurement around the employee engagement campaign too. So on the surface, things were looking really good. And I'll share a short case study with you about it.
It's convention for luxury travel brands, our client included, to talk about what they have. But we discovered that a greater story exists in who they are. Their people, their sincerity, spontaneity, and heart set them apart. This was a positioning they could own. But how would they keep the brand's inner soul alive in the hearts of 66,000 individuals? The staff, the face of the brand across 70 hotels and resorts in 20 countries and more as they expanded across the world. The Shangri-La idea had no formula, no production line, no standard procedure. There was only one way. Build the brand from the inside out. Create a proposition with activities that equally touch the staff and the guest. First, the Shangri-La message was articulated in an engaging way. The message: Shangri-La treats guests not as king, but as kin, as family. Then we set the foundation of the proposition with our staff. No rule books, no do's and don'ts. We motivated them as family, not employees. We then created a campaign that touched hearts across borders and cultures, including everyone at Shangri-La. It was based on one simple truth. There is no greater act of hospitality than to embrace a stranger as one's own. The entire campaign was revealed to staff weeks before the public. We also involved them in launch events and activities across every Shangri-La hotel. They felt it, understood the message, and were inspired. After the launch, we kept going. To keep the spirit alive, we asked what they did to make guests feel special.
It's in our nature to give our guests memories that will last a lifetime.
Answers were evolved into post-launch ads. This is set to continue. Once the brand was accepted and embraced internally, we were ready to take it to the audience. After the campaign, an increase showed that 84% of the staff felt connected to the brand. 82% felt they were more involved. This correlated with guest satisfaction, which rose to 92%. Numbers aside, the emotional response couldn't have been better. Social media became friend, not foe. All this from building the brand from the inside out.
So feeling pretty pleased with ourselves that we'd done great employee engagement and got it all right. We had done all the measurement around it and connected none of it to business performance. We'd done a great job of making staff feel that they were now more connected to the brand and showing that it improved guest satisfaction. We then had a completely separate measurement program that tracked increased room nights, RevPAR, as a result increasing due to the campaign, but never connected any of that back to the employee engagement. So there were like two separate measurement programs going on. But as we heard yesterday, failure is part of the journey to success. So I've learned from that experience, and I'm here today to implore you also to learn from that and to start to incorporate it into your programs as well. So with that, I will pass over to our first speaker, to Ann-Sofie. If we can, guys, I just noticed the timer, you know already. Yeah, thank you. How did I do? Did I under time? Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Ann-Sofie to also share an example from SKF. Thank you, Ann-Sofie.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Everybody knows me as Ann-Sofie. I'm called Ann-Sofie Krol, if my dad would tell you. But just call me Ann-Sofie. Okay, so I've brought a case study that you might have seen yesterday when you listened to Sophia. I hope you all did. Sophia Nord is the marketing manager, global marketing manager at SKF regarding marketing research and insights, and she's our customer. She was telling us a story on how SKF has become a data insight-driven company, and they're using product data as well as communication, marketing, and sales data to make sure that they map according to the customer journey. So, how are they doing this? Well, we've worked with them for about a year at byBrick Insight, and what we did was and I find it so interesting listening to your case, because we've actually done a framework that has both sides, even if we've just implemented the external one so far, even if that digs into the internal as well. But we've done two different setups so that you can view internal comms and external, but with the same metrics and with PISO in the middle. So this is a fully integrated system with anything within the PISO model, and it connects marketing, communication, sales, but also HR and other departments. And right now, we've started a year ago, and it might seem like a long time, but no, we just started. So now we're doing external, and the internal in-depth framework is going to be launched later on. When we did this, SKF had the opportunity to get to know AMEC quite a lot, and they looked a lot at the framework that we were presenting to them. And therefore, they decided to align and integrate the AMEC framework with their marketing process. So they've created this marketing compass that Sophia was talking about yesterday. That compass is not a measurement framework, it's the actual project management tool for their marketing and communication staff. So that aligns business objectives all the way through to measurement and follow-up. But it also includes aligning objectives, getting stakeholder commitments, launching it into the different departments working on marketing and communication. We've created a metrics selection tool, because when you do these type of big systems, it's quite a lot of metrics getting into the system. So they get help, and they can see, depending on the activity that they do, what would be good metrics to use. We also created sort of a helpful ongoing, like the during, because you can see here we've got pre, during, after, which is really important to always measure. But in the during phase, in today's landscape, a lot has to do with optimization. So through this tool, they can then look at how are the objectives align with activities, the indicators that they are doing the right thing, the metrics they're using, and the results coming out of it. And how can then they change it and try to impact it more to get a better result at the end. And I think that the most impressive thing working with SKF has really been the way they've tackled it. From the beginning, they came onto this saying this has to be a change management project and process. This is not a way of standardizing reports. This is truly getting the team insight-driven. So they are themselves rolling this out. Sophia is leading that process. They've created webinars, and we only act as experts when they call upon us. They do all these different polls and things in their webinars to make sure that the team is on board. And they're working with 40 countries where they have offices, and even more if you look at the customer base. So, when you do this kind of system and you measure internal effect on rolling out an external campaign as well as internal comms projects, what do you need to think about? Well, I would say never forget the importance of definition. Defining every word, every metric that you're going to look at, and the kind of data that you have. We've gone through so many discussions. Take leads, for instance, that is like an impact, interesting impact to look at, how communication is impacting that. That's easy, right? That's business opportunities. Well, working in this kind of system, it can actually be a meeting, it can be a visitor at an event, it can be somebody emailing a request, it can be so many different things. So you'll need to define not only what it is, but how it's registered into a system, how that data is collected, and what it's supposed to do when it comes to follow-up and measurement. Objectives. We talk a lot here about setting smart objectives, and most companies will tell you that they're all working on it. Well, really make sure. because quite often this is sort of rushed through, especially when working in internal projects, because you quickly just move on to activation. So really go through that, because once the objectives are smart, it's so much easier to get the right discussion and the right measurement going. Metrics. Well, like I said, there are lots of them. But also, in our profession, we have so much embedded knowledge about metrics and how one metric can be called the same thing but be used in several platforms and not be exactly alike. Doing this kind of knowledge project means that the training material becomes massive, because we do want to leave that knowledge with the company. We want them to understand in depth so that they can be insight-driven. So don't forget about that. The systems. The only thing I'm going to say here, IT is your friend. So get close to the IT department. So important. So start small. We learned by doing pilot after pilot after pilot, and that's what we're going to do when we now roll out the internal version as well. You need to learn, and we talk about that all the time, but it's important not to rush things, because the people that you work with might not be as passionate about measurement as yourselves. And find the common denominator. A system can be really, really big, but it doesn't mean that everything has to be measured, and we talk a lot about that here. But find the one key KPIs, or several KPIs that are really telling the right story and that will get the thing across, so that you can aggregate and look on global and geographical scale. And then show value. This is the hardest one, I think. When you work, as in with this system, on something that is supposed to cater to not only communications and marketing and HR, but CRM and business segment managers and product owners and IT department. There are so many involved in this type of project. So understanding where's the value for everybody in this and why they should partake, why they should get involved, and how they can contribute is so important. So I say thank you with that.
I'm happy to be here today and share with you some of our experiences at SAP in terms of integrating internal communications activities into our overall POE model. So we had a couple conversations. I think that we heard throughout, let's see here, I think we have, let's see. Do we have the right slides on here?
Go forward. Just go forward.
Okay.
Forward through these to yours.
Sorry, just a second.
There we go.
Perfect. There we go. Awesome. So we've heard a couple conversations over the past few days about the importance of marketing and communications and aligning what we do to the overall, what the business cares about, specifically around the C-suite. So as we think about this, the session for our title today is POEM Inside and Out, and just covering up to some of the basic Barcelona principles in action, right? So as we think about new technologies, tools, new applications, we need to first start with what our objectives are, right? And I'm going to focus a lot of our content today around internal communications, but realize, you know, when we're talking about measurement and being relevant for the C-suite, you have to ensure that you're aligned to what your strategic objectives are, say the next 3 to 5 years, but also provide value along the way in terms of your short-term wins, and so you can demonstrate that you're making progress in the right direction. So if we go back to just our fundamentals here on the integrated measurement framework, if we focus on internal communications, some of our short-term objectives were to really drive awareness for the brand narrative, increase advocacy, also increase employee excitement and elevate that conversation to the C-suite in terms of what marketing communications is delivering to the business. Now, as we look at this, this really starts from the backdrop of what our strategic objectives are in terms of where we want to be in terms of a top 10 brand and what are those top drivers. So some of the specific areas that our internal communications efforts can help us on is increasing our employee engagement rate. That comes both through enablement and training, as well as excitement activities, creating modern marketers, the marketers of the future in terms of the technologies, the skills, their understanding, insight-driven marketing, as well as social media and other types of next-generation skills. And then also, how do we create brand recognition through a focus on industry recognitions and awards? So in summary, when we start thinking about our internal communications, how does that align to what our strategic objective is of the organization in terms of where you want to be to the next 3 to 5 years? And then what are the steps along the way that you can get there to show that you're pointed in the right direction and making progress? So this is a common framework that we like to use in terms of the customer journey, right? And when we think about the customer journey, it's often that brands think about the customer journey from their perspective, from an operational perspective. How many inquiries do we have? How many leads do we have? What's my conversion rate? And what's my renewal rate, right? But the customers really don't care about that, right? We want to use the customer's perspective in terms of market awareness, right? So unaided and aided awareness of the brand, education to increase understanding of what your brand is, what it delivers, intention, exploring more about how the brand can help individuals with their business, purchase consideration, and also advocacy. So in the time that we have here today, what I'd like to do is just kind of drill down on one component of this, which is the awareness phase, right? So obviously we have each one of these for our phases of the customer journey. We really want to understand what that customer experience is across our paid, owned, and earned media channels throughout the whole process. And I'll talk about that in just a few minutes here. But if we just drill down a little bit on the awareness perspective, what are some of those levers that we can use, and how can we understand where those opportunities are for improvement along the way? Because if you wait for some of your indicators in the intention or purchase phase of a campaign, you're too late. You really want to put in these trigger points much earlier in the process. So some of the key things that we look at is we look from a paid media perspective, our competitive media spend, so we know how we're faring against our competitors, our total impressions, from an owned media perspective, our website visits, our search, our email open rates. From earned, that comes both from our traditional and social media monitoring, brand recall, association with a brand narrative. So if we think about internal communications, how can we leverage, our organization has approximately 90,000 employees globally. And if we look at what the characteristics are of a top 10 brand, they are purposeful, they have innovation, they have consistency in terms of their messaging, and also ubiquity and awareness. So how can we ensure that our brand narrative ripples through in everything that we do from a marketing and communications perspective? And our 90,000 employees play a key role in that, aside from just our creative assets and what we put into market. So some of the things that we track are, number of employees participating in brand activation activities. That includes activities we have within offices around the world, brand ambassadors, people who are specifically trained on the brand that are like our conduits to help share our brand message. We can really amplify that through social media, through leveraging social media, having content that we have our employees publish. community participation, and then really just, we're in the process now of having training for all of our employees around why brand matters and how we can ensure that consistency and messaging in terms of what we're doing. Here's just an example of some of our internal communications activities from our prior campaign. We just launched a new campaign in April of this year. This gives you a feel for how we've integrated this into our overall performance readout and what we're sharing for each of our board activities. So introducing our employees to the campaign, increasing the number of excitement activities in the office, as well as some of the corporate portal activities. So this, in terms of measuring employee engagement, we do have an annual survey, which we do, and we'll be tracking that each year on an annual basis as well. So if we come back to just some of the basics of the Barcelona principles, some of the specific internal communications related outcomes and impacts that we have include consistency and messaging, right? So if we have a competitive brand that spends more on media, it's hard to own your brand narrative. If you have that consistency and messaging and what you're able to do, you're actually able to own some of the key tenets of our brand narrative. Through our focus on employees and creating our modern marketers, we have a 4x increase in the usage of digital insights created by modern marketers. We've moved up 4 places to number 17 per the Brand Z, Most Valuable Brands, up 1 rank for Interbrands, and we moved up 35 places to Fortune Magazine's Best Companies to Work For. So all these activities are aligned to what our strategic objectives are for the organization that we incorporate on an annual basis and how we can leverage internal communications as part of that process. So that's what we have today, and we can do the lessons learned towards the end. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you to AMEC for the invitation, organizations, and my presentation is focused on the model that we are building nowadays. Iberdrola is a company that manages electricity, and we have a lot of different challenges, and communication is one of them. And I think that the data integration is a matter of skills. Why? Because it's very difficult to find a person specialized in business strategy, media measurement, social media measurement, web analytics, SEO, social and market research, advertising and sponsorship, media planning, stakeholders management, data science. I think that we need superheroes. I don't know anybody that have this knowledge in only one person. So this is important because if we want to implant an integrated data strategy, we need new profiles, new skills, a specialist in integrated measurement, not a specialist in every channel or every kind of action. If not, we have not the criteria for integrated measurement, evaluation, and strategy. So I think that this is the first step to try to move the industry, the communication industry, to this objective. I see 3 challenges. The first one, context. That means quantity and quality of that data. The second one is new communication standard metrics. You know, a long time ago, advertising value equivalent was the king of metrics in communication management. Was the king 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and now what is the metric that is the king when we talk about integrated strategy, integrated measurement? There is not only one. There are a lot of metrics, but we don't know who is the new king. So I think that we have to promote by the consensus a new metric to explain that the strategy of measurement is integrated. And what about siloed? Our approach is not to break silos, is to kill silos, and I'm going to tell you how. Okay, what about context and the quantity of data? Our model is to move from in monitoring, analysis, and evaluation. The brand is not in the center of our monitoring, analysis, reporting. It's not anymore. Why? Because we move to how influence the brand to the public. And then we need a lot of information, data, what are the other influencers doing, and this is very, very, very difficult to implant because of the quantity of data. So we have a huge target to be influenced and a crowd of competitors creating contents, messages, and opinions at the same time. From a monitoring point of view, we have 90% of information from this crowd of competitors and only 10% of information about our own brand. This is a real move to understand communication measurement, not only a function to help communication department, but a function to help business through business intelligence. So this is very important. And the focus should be on relevance of the brand in the context. So if we don't measure the context, we don't know if we are relevant or not. And that's the point. The difficulty is to collect all the data, to identify the influencers, to evaluate who is relevant or not. So relevance of the brand is the focus. And how can we change the model of measurement to create different metrics? For example, new standard. These are some examples that we have created last year. This is cross with data from media, from digital, influencers, etc., Twitter. The first one, reputational relevancy index, that are composed by topic relevance, depending on the matter, the subject, relevance of the author of the publication, and relevance of the audience of this author. And this is a new metric to understand and to evaluate all the environments, all the players, all the conversations. The second one is relevance of multi-channel diffusion, RGM. And we evaluate the different publications through the number of unique media and authors that talk about some story, number of channels where the story is being told, and the audience of all these different channels. And the third one is very, very important, is the Digital Industry Influence Index. And with this new metric, we compare what a media says, what an influencer says, what our brand says, through four components. The number of influenced entities, the engagement rate of the entity, the engagement per publication, and the audience of the author of the publication. So I'd like to invite AMEC to develop these kind of metrics to substitute the advertising value equivalent. Our approach to resolve this silo management is not to depend on the data of every team of communication, of every channel, social media, media relations, sponsorship. Our approach is to create an intelligence unit team that is in charge of all the monitoring, analysis, evaluation, and reporting with its own tools. So we have the tool, we have the budget, we have the criteria, and we have internal customers. And we give service to these operational teams. So we don't ask for data. We have our own data. And the operational teams ask for the evaluation if the things are working or not. The focus on influence and reputation. And with this movement, we get integrated knowledge, not isolated knowledge by campaign or by channel. So this is our approach. With this example of digital and offline number of publication, as I told you, the brand is not the center, it's a part of the conversation, and we collect, on average, 30,000 publications monthly, 140,000 publications from conversations from the sector, but not only competitors or other brands, but conversations without mentioning any brand. For example, climate change. We collect all the conversation, all the publication that mention climate change. And the third level is more than 200,000 publications from other sectors, very big companies from other sectors, peers, and we collect that information. What about internal communications? I think that the strategy that works, and it's the connection between external communication and internal communication, is the brand ambassadors strategy. And this is an example, you know, the internal climate survey. It's not very popular when the company, your own company, invites you to answer this questionnaire, and you have to give your opinion about the boss, the company. So last year, that's before, the company invited the team only with an email. That's the traditional way. But we moved to these brand ambassadors, and the participation increased from 50% to 77% through different kind of actions. So this is a very good example that ambassadors works. I'm going to show you a video.
Las encuestas de clima pienso que no se les da la importancia que se les merece.
Una iniciativa de la empresa con motivo de acercarse más a nosotros los empleados.
Si todos al final tenemos las mismas inquietudes, eso se oirá, por eso está bien esta encuesta.
Me parece un buen canal para transmitir tus opiniones, tus sugerencias.
La encuesta de clima laboral para Iberdrola sobre todo es tener la voz de los empleados. Es muy importante, somos una empresa de 33.000 personas y es muy importante que cada persona, cada empleado de Iberdrola nos diga, le diga a la empresa qué es lo que opina y qué podemos mejorar. Que Iberdrola es cada una de las personas. O sea, Iberdrola, la imagen de Iberdrola, lo que la gente ve de Iberdrola, eres tú. Es muy importante que cada uno aporte, porque la suma de todos es lo que da realmente visión. Si vas teniendo denominadores comunes, es un mensaje muy importante para la dirección. Va a decir, oye,
I'll provide the English translation shortly.
aquí porque muchas personas pensamos que la empresa puede mejorar.
Then Jose, after the video, if we can wrap it up for questions at the end. Thank you.
Que seamos todos más parte de la empresa.
Saber de primera mano pues, qué es lo que nos preocupa y qué es lo que opinamos de cómo se están haciendo las cosas.
Me parece una herramienta muy útil porque nos permite contarle a la empresa qué es lo que nos preocupa, cuál es nuestra situación y que se nos tenga en cuenta.
Me siento escuchado, además he encontrado mucho apoyo dentro de la compañía.
Nos da la oportunidad de poder opinar. Otra cosa es que individualmente cada uno participemos, pero la oportunidad por lo menos se nos da.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jose Carlos.
Marion, thank
All
you.
right. I'd love to welcome some questions from the audience because, again, this being a workshop, you've seen some very practical models, people giving you a glimpse of how does it look, what are they tracking, how do they measure it, and how are they building new models and even new indexes to measure it by. So can I please invite any questions from the audience for any of our speakers? Thank you. Right down the front here. Do we have a microphone? Thank you.
The question is more to Jose about the presentation. So if I understood it correctly, you're looking at an integrated team that has all the data and owns that data. So is that something that is already accomplished in your company? Like you've already accomplished that? What were the challenges you faced in trying to achieve that?
Okay. All of us know that the problem was the silo manage of the data. And this is a change, a very big change. So at the beginning, the operational teams was not aligned with this decision, but at the end, they have evaluate this decision as very good because they have more time to do operational action, and the evaluation and manage of the data is something that they are not experts. So we have created this expert team to give service to them, and we are managing together.
So, Jose, if that wasn't clear to everyone, Jose Carlos has done something quite revolutionary in taking measurement out of all the individual teams that had data into one combined intelligence team that sits together and can monitor all the data across the business. Quite revolutionary. I was joking with someone yesterday, you know, the current system we have where the marketers all measure themselves, the talent people measure themselves, social media people all measure themselves. What are we naturally induced to do? Prove how brilliant and effective we've been. This is like the financial director or the CFO conducting the audit and certifying that all his work was great. So you've taken that system and pulled it apart and put everyone together into one team, so they're not part of the operational team, they're actually a part of the intelligence and insight team.
That is great revolution.
Thank you. Yeah, Anthony.
I'm just so amazed about that.
No, because that is difficult to pull off. But I also think about the case that I brought forward, since we work a lot with data that is being analyzed by other types of professions as well. When it comes to CRM data and sales and everything, they would not let anyone else. That would be like a big step for a big global company to say, no, we're just going to pull everything, like all the digital data that we have on our sales process. That would be a huge step for them if that were. I can understand it on the marketing and comms. I think it gets tricky once you move into web and e-commerce, and even worse when it goes into sales, because then you're very close to the heart of the business. So that would be stakeholder management plus everything,
Indeed. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you. Alison here.
Good. My question is just how, from a cultural perspective...
Sorry, can you hold the mic a little closer for us?
Hello. Hi, from a cultural perspective, how did you manage that change within your organizations? Because obviously, for example, pulling everyone into one team, I imagine you faced some pushback on that.
I think that another very important point, if you want to change something internally, you have to take people from outside, new people, and that's a very good strategy, because if you try to change the people that are managing as usual, it's very hard. But we have mixed people from outside and new people and the people that we have.
So if I could just add a little bit to that. So the approach that we use is, at the highest level of our organization, we have very specific business goals around repositioning our brand, leading in critical business, and also creating modern marketers. So at that macro level, we have strategic KPIs that the C-suite and the business care about. And each of our regional functions and teams say, okay, great, here is that monthly or quarterly brand value, brand health. Here are the very specific initiatives that me and my team are going to focus on. And we have those second-tier metrics, right? So, for example, if it comes to digital media, we may say, okay, each of our market units and each of our regional teams are going to have a specific target around earned brand mentions. And what that does is that creates that connection between those high-level business objectives to what we actually do in the field in the market unit. So it's that linkage between what's important to the organization and what people do on the front lines that's as important, and that's included as part of their overall goals in our success map tools.
Any additional questions? No, well, I'm standing between you and coffee, so let's please thank the panel in a very enthusiastic AMEC style. Thank you very much.
Thank you.